German view of Boris Johnson is very much you can't take him seriously. You can't. He has become very much a caricature.
What about if you've been trying to explain Britain for the last 10 years to a whole other country? Yes, how has it been seen through German eyes? The journalist, Stefanie Bolzen, has been the London correspondent for Die Welt, covering Brexit, 5 prime ministers, 3 general elections, to name just a few. I'm delighted that Stefanie joins me now. Morning.
Hello.
So you're off to Washington.
Yes.
To do the same job.
It might be similar because it might become
just as wild.
crazy.
Crazy. As wild. Yeah. What's it been like? I mean, it has been a particularly... When you got the call saying, we want to send you to London, what did you think you'd be doing back in 2013?
I was thinking I would be doing a lot of quirky stories about the countryside, horse racing, the royals, not so much politics because this was such a stable country. Yeah. David Cameron was in power. There was a bit of interesting coalition, these things going on, but no. I mean, to be fair, the very first assignment I did was on the 23rd of January 2013. In Bloomberg, this speech David Cameron did announcing. That was my first assignment, not my first day, but the first assignment. And I looked at this article I wrote at the time, and it was just like unimaginable. Brexit was something that you couldn't even pronounce. It was like, that's the joke. Yeah.
And so at what point did you realise you weren't going to be going out into the British countryside and you were just completely consumed by politics?
It started actually already in 2014 with the independence referendum in Scotland in September 2014, which was a big thing, although, of course, no one, but still the idea that the United Kingdom might split was so historic. And then only, 2 years later, or less than 2 years later, you had this historic decision of Brexit. So.
Yeah, in fact, let's have a reminder of that. This is from 2016. There's David Dimbleby on the night of the referendum.
52 to 48, so a 4-point lead for leaving the EU. And that's the result of this referendum, which has been preceded by weeks and months of argument and dispute and all the rest of it. The British people have spoken, and the answer is, we're out.
We're out. So how did that go down in Germany? And you were sort of right on the front line of reporting it.
It was a shock. Yeah. I mean, it was a shock to Germany, to politics, of course. I think it was a big shock to the German government at the time, because Germany traditionally always very much relied on the United Kingdom doing the deals in Brussels. But also personally, I mean, growing up as a European citizen and Britain being part of Europe. I mean,
and was it a shock because David Cameron had told Angela Merkel, it's okay, I'm going to win this? Was it because Europeans and Germans can't understand why you'd want to leave?
It was a shock because it was such a historic decision. And from that day on, everything was different. Yeah. Everything was different. The European Union wasn't the same anymore. And it was like a blank sheet. So now what? From here, where are we going? And I had been a Brussels correspondent before. And I mean, we met a lot of times in the Justus Lipsius building in the middle of the night, sitting there and through all these councils. You know how difficult and tricky and complex Brussels is. And you were in there since 1973. And to disentangle that, I just couldn't imagine how to do it. And obviously, we still don't know how to do it.
And then, of course, after Brexit comes this guy.
And since I know that after 5 weeks, frankly, of electioneering, this country deserves a break from wrangling, a break from politics, and a permanent break from talking about Brexit.
Yeah, we didn't quite get that, did we? What was the German view of Boris Johnson?
The German view of Boris Johnson is very much you can't take him seriously. You can't. I mean, he has become very much a caricature in Germany. In most of the German media reporting, I wouldn't say in our newspaper, but in many newspapers it was. And then, I mean, if you remember, that was, I think, on the 13th of December. Yeah. And shortly afterwards, COVID struck. Yeah. And then in April, the Prime Minister we thought he might be dying. Yeah. And then the pandemic. And, I mean, from there, it was just like a turmoil, a constant turmoil.
And I suppose there's Germans don't like Boris Johnson, but they're sort of fascinated by him. I mean, if we'd had a very dull, presumably you wrote much more about Boris Johnson than you did about Theresa May.
Oh yeah, he was fantastic copy. I mean, so many good stories about the wallpaper, about his wife, the dog, the children. I mean, fantastic. It's a fantastic story, but that might be seen as a bit cynical. But hey,
Well, no, that's what we're here for. It's what we're here for. And then obviously we had Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, now Rishi Sunak. What's the level of interest in British politics, British life in Germany after all of that?
it's plummeting.
Is it?
Yeah, very much so. Because it's calm now again. It's kind of calm, and also obviously because there's so many other things going on. And Germans focus on mainly the war in Ukraine.
Yeah. And Rishi Sunak's just less of a rock star politically.
Yeah, I mean,
it's news terms.
He has a very interesting family backstory, but you write it once or twice and that's it.
And so you're leaving London. What will you miss about Britain as you head to Washington?
The humour.
The humour.
Yeah, the humour and the beauty of the countryside.
Yeah.
The beauty of London. The beauty of people like my colleagues, and I'll miss that.
And when you're off to Washington?
In 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Oh, well, best of luck. That's pretty soon. That's
Yeah.
pretty soon. But Stefanie, it's been lovely. Our paths have crossed many times. And in fact, somebody's just texting and saying, "Don't go, Stefanie. You'll be such a big loss."
Oh.
There we are. That's really nice. Stefanie, it's really good to see you. Thanks so much for that. That is Stefanie Bolzen. Spent the last 10 years covering British politics. And now she's off to Washington for a rest, because obviously we're much quieter there.